Tucked away inside your head, there's this tiny, often forgotten piece of our anatomy that has a huge impact on how we hear and even how we keep our balance. Today, we're going to dive into this unsung guardian of the ear, the eustachian tube.
You know that feeling, right? That pressure building up, everything sounds kind of muffled, and then that sudden pop of relief when you're on a plane? It happens to all of us, but have you ever stopped to think about what's actually going on in there? It's a brilliant little system at work.
And here it is, the star of our show, the eustachian tube. It's this tiny little canal that's responsible for that whole experience. It's the master regulator, the silent hero working behind the scenes to keep things in balance.
So what does this little guardian actually do? Well, it's got three really critical jobs. First, it equalizes pressure. That's the pop we all know. Second, it's like a tiny drainage pipe, getting rid of any fluid or mucus that builds up. And third, it keeps the middle ear ventilated with fresh air. It's a constant, delicate balancing act.
But what happens when that guardian fails? When the system breaks down? Well, that's when you get a condition that's at the heart of so many ear problems, from that simple clogged feeling all the way to serious hearing loss. It's called eustachian tube dysfunction.
At its core, eustachian tube dysfunction, or ETD for short, is really simple. It's just a failure of that number one job, regulating pressure. When that tube gets stuck and can't open and close the way it's supposed to, it kicks off a whole chain reaction of problems.
And you know, this simple bit of anatomy explains something every parent knows: why kids get way more ear infections than adults. It's all about the angle. A child's tube is almost flat, so fluid just sits there. An adult's tube is much steeper, so gravity can help drain things out. It's a simple change in geometry with massive consequences.
Okay, so here's the critical thing to understand. When that tube fails, it doesn't just feel a little stuffy, it creates a cascade, like a series of dominoes falling, with 4 distinct ripple effects that can damage our hearing in very different ways.
And here are the 4 dominoes we're going to break down. First, the stiffness effect. Then, the mass effect. Third, a failure of what's called the window mechanics. And finally, the most serious one, vascular stress. Let's watch how this damage builds, starting with the first 2.
Okay, this is perfect. Think of these as 2 sides of the same coin. On one hand, you get the stiffness effect. Negative pressure literally sucks your eardrum inward, making the whole system tight like a drum skin. This makes it harder to hear low-frequency sounds, like deep voices or bass. On the other hand, if the tube can't drain, fluid builds up. That's the mass effect. It's like adding weight to the system, which dampens the high-frequency sounds you need for clarity.
Now, the third ripple is where things start to get a lot more serious. That pressure imbalance can actually distort the delicate windows that separate the middle ear from the inner ear, from the cochlea itself. When that happens, it can mess with your balance, causing vertigo, and can even trigger tinnitus, that awful, persistent ringing. This is way beyond just feeling clogged.
And that leads us to the fourth and most damaging ripple. This quote comes from a huge breakthrough study back in 1980. Researchers discovered that chronic, long-term ear problems could cause physical damage deep inside the inner ear, specifically to parts called the stria vascularis and spiral ligament. Think of these as the inner ear's battery pack and power lines. They supply all the blood and nutrients.
And this is what we call vascular stress. All that relentless pressure from chronic ETD can actually choke off the blood supply to the cochlea. It's essentially starving those super delicate hair cells of the oxygen they need to survive. And this isn't temporary. This is how you can get permanent, irreversible hearing loss.
What's absolutely incredible is how long it took us to piece this whole story together. I mean, look at this. All the way back in 1863, a doctor just figured out the stiffness and mass effects by listening to his patients. Then in 42, we connected the dots to vertigo. Paparella had his big discovery in 1980, and just a few years ago, modern computer models confirmed what that doctor observed over 150 years ago. It's just a fantastic story of science in action over time.
So we've gone deep into the mechanics. Now let's pull the lens back and look at the big picture, at the true stakes of this condition. Because this isn't just about a minor inconvenience, it's a critical global health issue.
1.5 billion. That's how many people around the world are living with hearing loss. And while there are a lot of causes, eustachian tube dysfunction is a major and often overlooked driver behind so many of those cases. And this chart really tells the story. ETD isn't just about that temporary, conductive hearing loss. Because of those deeper ripple effects we talked about, it's a key player in permanent, sensorineural hearing loss, and even in mixed cases where both parts of the ear are damaged. So if the problem is a failure to regulate pressure, how do we fix it? Well, let's look at the different philosophies behind the treatments, because they try to solve the problem in fundamentally different ways.
You've basically got three main approaches. Ear tubes are a bypass. They just create a new hole to let air in, ignoring the tube itself. Balloon dilation is more of a brute force approach, physically pushing the tube wider. But then there's a third way, catheterization, which has a totally different goal, to actually reactivate the tube's own muscles and restore its natural function.
And that right there is the key difference. Are we just putting a patch on the problem, creating a workaround, or are we actually trying to fix the system and get it working the way it was designed to? One offers temporary relief, the other aims for a real long-term solution.
And this really brings us to the final, bigger question. When we're looking at any chronic condition, we have to ask ourselves this. When a natural system in our body fails, is our goal just to manage the symptoms? Or should we be aiming higher, to truly restore the elegant, balanced system we were born with? It's a question that goes way beyond this one tiny tube. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.